So, I believe I'm ready to call this done. I have accomplished everything that I wanted to do with this. I like the background. It's maybe not my most successful background, but it works quite nicely. I like the variegation of the textures, which are subtle, and the color. I like the gradation from cool and darkish to warm and lightish. I like what I did on the perch. I'm pretty happy with the bird. There are always things that I would like to have done better. Virtually every painting that I do, but I think that it's a pretty accurate representation of my subject. And I think that the bird and the perch are separated quite nicely from the background. I think the bird is definitely the star of the show, and the perch is a good supporting actor in my little stage presentation here. And the background is exactly what it should be, just a background. It supports it, and I think it sets it off pretty nicely, but it doesn't compete with it. So I'm going to stop this recording, and I will be back. So the painting has had time to dry. I did give it a little assist with a blow dryer. I also, between the time I turned the camera off and now, I did a little bit of adjustment in this area here. The dark value that I painted around the toe and the foot in this area was a little too dark. The edge was too well defined, and so I redistributed some of it and pulled some out and created some streaks, and generally toned that area down. So in the course of all of this building shadows and redefining the edge, I've made this claw considerably smaller than this claw, so I think before I go any farther, I'm going to try to correct that. So I'm going to use some of my opaque white to do that. And before I turn the camera on, I soaked the jar under hot water to loosen the lid so it's open. Let's see, what brush should I use here? I think I'll use my double aught, and I'm going to rinse it off before I dip it into the white paint. I also shook up the jar of white paint a little bit, so hopefully it's well mixed up. Okay, I'm lengthening it and bulking it up a little bit. It is in the rear, so perspective would make it look a little smaller, but it looks far too small the way it is. All right, that looks okay. It's a little stark. So now I'm going to tone it down. Just dropping in some water, and now I'm going to squeeze my brush out and lift. I don't dare use a paper towel because I think that I would probably lose control of it. But this small brush is working pretty nicely. Okay, I've lifted up most of the the pool of water. Now I'm going to take a chance on using my paper towel. Yep, that worked fine. I'm going to try to lift a little more of the white. Once again, I'm flirting with losing the edges. I think I'm going to leave it at that. That looks pretty good. It's fairly close in value to the nearer one. Might be a little brighter than I would like it to be. Let's try using my tiny scrubber. This is my number 2, and I've wet it. Just dabbed it on the masking tape to get rid of the blob of water that was going to release as soon as it touched down. Good enough. I think that's fine. Because I'm so focused on it, it's all I can see right now, and it still seems a little bit bright, but I know that once I've separated myself from the painting a little bit, it'll probably be fine. So I'm gonna leave it alone. So now I think I'm ready to sign this and call it done. So let's give you the big picture here. I'm pretty happy with the overall balance of the painting. I'm happy with the depth, the sense of depth that was created by the graded wash and the cool colors at the top, warmer colors at the bottom. I'm happy with the separation of the bird from the background. So with that, I'm going to sign it, and then I'll remove the tape, and we can see what the finished product looks like. I'll give you a quick tour. So I think I'm going to use my opaque white for my signature. I will use white sometimes. I will use a dark value. It all depends on the value of the painting, where I'm actually painting the signature. But in this case, I think white will be good. It's kind of on a mid value. It could go in either direction, but I think because I'm trying to set a relatively light value and warm value for the bottom of my graded wash, the white will help to reinforce that, where the dark would tend to push it in the other direction. So I'm going to use my my 2-aught again. So signatures are fairly important. It's an artist's branding. So it's fairly important to be consistent, and it's important for them to look good. I used to try to do something closer to a real signature, but because my name has, in lowercase, has a lot of curves in it, I found it difficult to do it consistently. So probably 10 years ago, I decided to just go to all caps, which makes everything a straight line, makes it a lot easier to paint more or less the same every time. And my signature has changed a little bit in the last 10 years. Originally, I just painted all of the caps the same height. And then at some point I decided to make the H a little taller, extend the crossbar, and paint an underscore under the other letters. I admire artists who have a well-designed signature, and I think mine works pretty nicely. It's simpler than a lot, but I think it works fine. So I also, being cognizant of the fact that I'm selling prints which are oftentimes blown up to very large sizes, the signature can be a little bit glaring and a little distracting, especially in larger sizes. So it's a good idea to tone it down. So I'm going to now carefully paint some clear water over it, and then lift. There you can see a little bit of the milkiness that happens when you go back into opaque pigments. I've lost a little bit there, so I think I'm going to have to go back in and reconstruct that a little bit. I'm a little bit out of practice with this. This is the first painting I've actually finished in quite a long time. Okay, now that's too strong. That's better. I'll call that done, I think. So now comes the unveiling. I used to stretch my paper, and stretching my paper had some advantages. It made it much less likely that I would get these kind of streaks from pooling, because the paper never couldn't expand as much as an unstretched piece of paper can. The downside is that I couldn't do what I'm about to do. So this is regular painter's tape that you buy at any hardware store, Home Depot, Lowe's, whatever, which makes it less aggressively sticky. It can still kind of tear up paper, especially when it's been on there for a while. And I originally taped this paper down in early September, maybe even late August. So we're now getting close to Thanksgiving, so it's been on there for a while. So the longer it's on there, the more the more it becomes welded to the paper. So in order to prevent tearing the paper up, I peel it off in this direction, sort of off to the side at an angle. And that way the edges are never challenged. It's the edges that are most likely to tear. So the two ends were taped down last, so those are the pieces of tape that come off first. It really has stuck on pretty well. This edge has a deckled edge, so this is where it's most likely to tear. But pulling it off obliquely like this, it seldom, if ever, tears. The tape sometimes does. So there you can see that it's got a nice clean border on it, nicely defined by the edges of the tape. There is at least one place where it bled under the tape just slightly, but even that is pretty innocuous. I couldn't do with my stretched paper because I used water activated packing tape, brown craft paper packing tape, to mount the stretched paper. I had to use that because it was the only thing that would stick to the paper when it was wet enough. The idea with stretching is you pre-wet it, allow the paper to expand as much as it's going to, and wait for the surface water to be absorbed and evaporate, so that the paper is dry enough for the tape to stick to, and then you stick it down with water activated tape, and when the paper dries, it shrinks and becomes as tight as a drum, so that then when you work wet, it doesn't have the capacity to stretch more than it did when you first taped it down. So it controls the amount that it can expand and create hills and valleys that cause the paints to flow off the hills and collect in the valleys. It still does happen, but not to nearly the extent that it does with a dry mounted piece of paper like this. But the downside is when you remove the craft tape, you end up with this ugly residue of tape around the border. So it has to be mounted behind a mat so that you can hide all of those ugly remnants of tape. This, on the other hand, could be floated on a piece of mat board. You have a lot more options for mounting it. Each has its advantages and disadvantages, but I like the white border, I have to say. So I put up with the fact that I don't have as much control over the paint. So the last thing that I want to do here, before I call it done, is to find a pencil And on the back side, I want to write today's date in pencil. So that way I have a record of when it was completed, for whatever reason. It's good to know these things, so that's always the last thing that I do. Since it's done, I will give you a tour. So I'm starting with the photograph, and you can see the details, and then there's my painted bird. Pretty good likeness, if I do say so. The background is kind of, it's a very subtle modeling. I've got what photographers call bokeh, which is, the background was very out of focus, mostly because there was a fair amount of separation between the subject and the background. Also, it's a function of the particular lens that I was using. In my painting, on the other hand, I have more variegation, but it's a similar effect, and I don't really care that much about trying to duplicate the background. I use it as a jumping off point, and then I try to do my own thing. And then you can see the perch. The perch has a lot of texture and some fairly deep shadows. My perch is darker. It doesn't have nearly as many details or shadows. I mean, the shadows are bigger, but it has a flatter appearance. But I think that is a good thing, because all of the detail in that perch, if I tried to duplicate that in my painting, I think it would call way too much attention to the perch and steal the show, or at least compete with the bird, which is what I want it to be, the main focus of the painting. So a couple of things that it's a generally accepted axiom that that the eye is drawn to the area of greatest contrast, and in this painting, that is the face. It's the eye and the cheek. So that I think works quite nicely. Also, the warmest colors, the chestnut of the crown, that tends to draw the eye. So all in all, I think it's a pretty successful painting. I'm happy with it. And with that, I'm going to call this session done. And I look forward to moving on to my next painting, and hopefully you'll come back and join me in the process. In the meantime, thank you for watching.